TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. SJ&L General Contractor specializes in asphalt, demolition, concrete finishing, and heavy hauling. This family-owned business is licensed in Alabama and Tennessee. You can contact them for any of your construction needs. 931-433-4660. That is 931-433-4660 or 3Ws and a dot sjnl.com. www.sjnl.com. SJ&L General Contractor is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Let me start out simply by saying, you're welcome. Now, you don't know why you're welcome because you don't think you've actually thanked me, but unconsciously and in your heart of hearts, you probably have and just didn't know it. So let me, for posterity, state again, you are welcome. Now, in order to understand what happened, it probably has a combination of things. And number one, it may have something to do with my Southern accent. It may have something to do with my phraseology. It's gotten me in trouble before when I've asked for things in odd ways. I was in Cloverdale, Indiana. This is just south of Indianapolis, Indiana. It's the furthest north I had ever been in my preaching career. I was a young college student. I had been working in the summers with the Alexander City Church of Christ, and I had driven up to be with a group of folks in Cloverdale, Indiana. And so while I was in Cloverdale, Indiana, I was running around with my good friend, Mike Carter. Mike is a friend of mine that I'd met while I was in college. And so I was there doing a vacation Bible school in the mornings. And in the evenings, I was doing a special lectureship series for the teenagers. And in between those things, Michael and I were running around having various adventures. And so this particular day, we'd stopped somewhere to get lunch. And I don't know where we'd been, what we'd been doing. Maybe we'd been rappelling over at Fern Cliffs. But we stopped in to this place to eat lunch. And I walked in and it was a White Castle. Now, I'd never seen a White Castle before. I'd never been in a White Castle. I don't think they existed in the South at those times. If they did, I'd never seen one. But as I walked in and got acclimated to the restaurant, I recognized, well, this is just the Yankee version of Crystals. And I love Crystals, and I like to eat a lot of Crystals. So I'm standing there in line. I step up to the counter, and the lady says, "Can I take your order?" And I said, "Yeah, give me about a half a dozen of them little bitty burgers." And she said, "I'm sorry?" And I said, "Give me about a half a dozen of them little bitty burgers." And she said, "What is this man saying?" I said, "I just need a half a dozen of those little bitty burgers." She looked around and says, "I do not know what this man is talking about. Can someone help me?" I repeated, "Let me have about a half a dozen of them little bitty burgers." And then Michael just leaned forward and said he'd like 6 White Castles, okay? And I got my order. Well, 6 White Castles equals a half dozen of those little bitty burgers. So fast forward. I'm in Huntsville, Alabama. It's in the mid 80s. I'm standing in line at a Wendy's. And while I'm standing in line at Wendy's waiting to place my order for my food, I'm having a conversation with myself. And I said to myself, "Self, I think we'll have a Frosty today." And myself answered me in its best imitation of my wife, "You are not supposed to eat Frosties." To which I responded, "I know I'm not supposed to eat Frosties, but I'll just eat a little bitty, teeny, tiny Frosty, and my blood sugar will never even know I've had a Frosty." Well, I don't know, myself was replying as the lady stepped to the counter and said, May I take your order, please? And so I ordered my fries, I ordered my burger, and I ordered a Diet Coke, and then I added, and I'd like one of those little bitty teeny tiny Frosties. Sir, the waitress responded, we don't sell junior Frosties to adults. It's my turn now to say, I'm sorry, sir, we don't sell junior Frosties to adults. Well, let me ask you this question, ma'am. If a small child walked in here, a little bitty teeny tiny person walked in and said, let me have a large Frosty, would you sell a large Frosty to a little bitty teeny tiny child? She said, yes, sir, we would. I said, well, if you'll sell a little bitty teeny tiny person a large Frosty, why won't you sell a little bitty teeny tiny Frosty to an adult person? Now, I should qualify for a junior Frosty on my height alone, but yet you refuse to do that. I think this is a bad policy. Now, she was unmoved. She was not swayed by my accurate ironclad logic, and she gave me my order with a large Frosty. Now, I'm sure that after I left the store, she went back and told her boss. She went back and met with the store manager and told her boss, did you realize that we would sell a large Frosty to a little bit teeny tiny person, but we won't sell a little bit teeny tiny person to an adult? To which the boss would have looked at her in horror and gotten on the phone with corporate and said, do you realize that our store has a policy that which we will sell a large Frosty to a little bitty teeny tiny person, but we won't sell a little bitty teeny tiny Frosty to an adult? To which I think corporate responded with, hey, we should be able to sell Frosties to anybody that wants one, regardless of their size and regardless of its size. And you'll notice that in the modern era, you can now walk into Wendy's and order any size Frosty you want. In fact, they'll give you a little keychain thing that looks like a Frosty, and every time you order a meal, they'll give you a free little bitty teeny tiny Frosty, also known as the Junior Frosty. Well, on this particular occasion, before I influenced Wendy's corporate policy, I got a large Frosty. And I wasn't supposed to eat a Frosty at all, but I'd been given a large Frosty, and because of the starving children overseas, I ate the whole thing. I shouldn't have eaten it. I shouldn't have eaten any of it, but I ate the whole thing, and I would not have eaten that much of that frosted goodness had this lady not forced me to by giving me a large Frosty. Now, what you've just witnessed is the most popular pass pattern in America. Now, it's not a pass you'll see in the NBA. It's not a pass you'll see in the NFL. It's not a pass you'll see on a soccer field. It's not a pass you'll see on a volleyball court, but it's called passing the buck. It's basically laying the blame for our mistakes, laying the blame for our actions, laying the blame for our choices, laying the blame for our failures, laying the blame for the things that we choose to do that we should not do. But instead of taking full responsibility, we blame it on other people. Eve tried it with God. Hey, this serpent beguiled me. The serpent deceived me. He led me down this path. Adam will say, the woman you gave me, which is a double barrel blame. He basically says it's the woman's fault, and I wouldn't have this woman if you hadn't given her to me. They're passing the buck. And it really is about personal integrity and personal accountability. You see, when I decide that I'm going to say that your actions or your inactions resulted in my behavior, a causal relationship, that because you did this, I was made to. Because you didn't do this, I then was made not to. If we take that approach and say that I can only make choices based on your responses, I can only make choices based on your actions, that the things that I do are out of my control. They go beyond my ability for autonomy. They go beyond my ability to choose. They go beyond my ability to make decisions. Then I basically become a victim. I'm a helpless, hapless soul floating on the current of the world. I remember in some kind of an illustration, it was pointed out to me that dead fish float downstream and only live fish can flow against the current. And I remember that as a kid, that if you just always go with the flow, if you're at the mercy of the stream, if you're at the mercy of the current popular thought, if you're at the mercy of what other people do, then you're really not alive, you're dead. And we abdicate our personal responsibility, and we abdicate our autonomy, and we play this blame game, and we pass the buck. And we make what we did or didn't do, what we said or didn't say, how we acted or how we reacted, and we make it somebody else's fault. Well, if I can only act based on your actions, then I, number one, am helpless. I don't have any control, and I don't have any autonomy or self-efficacy. In learning to accept responsibility, learning to accept limitations, learning to accept the fact that, hey, here's some things that I shouldn't do. Here's some places that I shouldn't go. Here's some ways that I should not act. And your behavior should not influence my personal parameters and my integrity. But if I ever give away that control, if I ever say, because of your actions or inactions, because of the things that happen in my circumstances, I get to give away my morals, I get to give away my integrity, I get to give away my responsibility. But I'm playing the blame game. I'm passing the buck. It takes a certain amount of integrity. It takes a certain amount of courage. It takes a certain amount of maturity. It really takes just a certain amount of common sense to begin to accept the responsibility for the things that we do, to accept the responsibility for the things we don't do, and live with those consequences without laying the blame at the feet of other people or using other people's actions or inactions as the reasons we do or do not do. Now, until we stop blaming everyone and everything, we won't ever find the real source of our own problem. That is my choices, it's my integrity, it's my self-control, it's my ability to self-regulate with either delayed gratification or impulse control. We have to realize that the changes that need to be made are on our end and not on the other people's end. On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is your marriage? And you come up with whatever number you want to come up with. Well, what would happen? What would it take to make that 6 a 7? What would it take to make that 7 an 8? And you may say, well, if my spouse would. And see, you're blaming the success or failure of your relationship on what they do or don't do. On a scale of 1 to 10, where's your marriage? Where's your job? Where's your career? Where's your academic? Where's anything? And what could you do to make that number change positive 1 point? That takes it out of the ballpark of what other people do or don't do, and it lays it directly at the blame of my personal choices, my responsibility, and in my integrity. And, I can blame eating a large Frosty on this lady at Wendy's all I want to. But Junior Frosty, regular Frosty, or large Frosty is irrelevant. I'm not supposed to eat Frosties. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3Ws and a dot, worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I am your host, Lonnie Jones. My wife Jackie and I moved to the city of Huntsville in 1986 for me to be a youth and family minister. I have been a minister since 1980. I have served in this community as a police chaplain assigned to a SWAT team since 1992, and I've been in private practice as a licensed professional counselor since 1998. I'm also an adventure educator and an avid outdoorsman. I dabble in rock climbing, and I goof around with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Our life has been full of many wonderful experiences, and some just outright adventures. I used to write about those things in a little church bulletin article, so now instead of asking you to read those things, we're just going to talk about them in our podcast. And as we talk about them, we're going to talk about the facts. The facts lead to concepts, and the concepts lead to application. One caveat about the facts is, for the most part, we're going to tell you the facts just as they happened. But every now and then, we're going to tell you the way other people have told us they remember it happening, with a little bit of embellishment. It's all good, clean fun and for educational purposes. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy Keeping Up with Jones.